Calling the Cemetery Commission meeting to order. Our first order of business is a request from Wendy Pearson, the director of the Stockbridge Law.
Thank you very much for letting me.
You might want to move into
here
the.
before you. Should I?
Oh, it's on over here, yeah.
I want to come up so you're on camera.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, great. And address you. It feels funny to address the camera. In any event, thank you very much for letting me speak today. I'm here to get some clarity about the new regulations for cemetery tours. As many of you know, the Museum and Archives has led its historic cemetery tours for at least a decade. We had one scheduled for this October, and then Karen, you informed me that there was a new policy which we didn't know about, and we still haven't seen, other than to know that what you said is we'll have to appear before the commission before we have any events. So we're absolutely willing to comply with that. I just want to get some clarity about before each event we would have to appear, or do we appear before the commission and say this year we have the following dates that we'd like to do tours. So I'm wondering if anyone knows how that will work for us.
So in particular, Karen had reached out to not just you, but there were other groups, including some groups that on Facebook were going to organize nighttime tours around Halloween. And all of a sudden it became a what's happening here, where all of a sudden, I think it was 3 different groups were looking to do things in the cemetery, publicize them, and then have it happen with the town having no idea that anything was even happening. So is there a direct policy? Not really. The Cemetery Commission doesn't have a direct policy, but in general, if somebody was going to use the lawn of the library for something, you would at least expect somebody to come forward and say, hey, we're looking to hold something here, we're publicizing and the rest. So I think this can be either informally done if we don't think this is a big issue, or formally done where we develop a policy and procedures and checklists or whatever going forward. I don't see a problem with being informal and having groups that are going to publicize. Obviously the cemetery is open to the public. People can go on their own. But if you're going to publicize, and I remember the one, we weren't sure how many people were going to come. It was on Facebook, and it was this haunted tour after dark of our cemetery. And they were publicizing it on Facebook, and it was like, could it be 100 people? Could it be what? What are the details of it? So that's where we're at now. We haven't developed a policy, but the concern was all of a sudden, and you sort of got roped in, I know you guys have done it before, and but it was sort of like, all right, pause everybody, what are we gonna do? So I think as a board, we need to make that decision. I would say in the case right now with the library and their tours, I think we just start with an informal, just let us know what's happening, that you're gonna be holding these events, and then just send an email to myself and Karen as the chair, just saying, here's the dates, and we'll just operate from that at the moment, unless this board would like to go and make a formal policy for use of the cemetery by outside groups.
Okay, Patrick, you want to say something?
Is the cemetery open during the evening after dark?
Right now, we have no publicized hours for the cemetery.
My only suggestion is that with the vandalism that we've seen there, I think that one way to deal with this would be that the cemetery is closed after dark, but that folks could apply for an event if they wanted to, and then at the discretion of the commission, we could allow the event after dark. I think that events during the day, we shouldn't regulate. That's my personal.
Yep.
Roxanne?
What vandalism are you referring to?
There's a number of stones that were vandalized over the last several
According
years.
to the report, which we're going to go over, vandalism is there's been some, but it's not a huge problem.
Okay, there was an Airbnb attendee, from Sergeant Street, where the kids went in and they broke some of the big urn-style headstones. That was reported to the police, I believe.
Okay, that's one
That's
event.
an event, so.
Well, I'm just saying that.
I'm not saying there's no
Yeah.
vandalism, but I
Yeah.
don't know that I want to make policy around the issue of vandalism, because I don't think that's it. But Roxanne, you were going to say.
Well, I kind of think it probably makes sense for us to address putting in place some kind of a policy, just because we have the opportunity. And not that it has to be cumbersome, But to answer your question, Wendy, in terms of, the library doing regular tours, which you've been doing for years, I would suggest that we think of that in the same way that the select board thinks about other entities in town when we're giving a permit or a license, that an event, if it's a repetitive, like in a given calendar year, that if you're going to go out X number of times over the summer for a tour, that's considered one event. It's the same thing, and you're just repeating it. Obviously, we'd want to know, how many times, but I don't think that's critical, and I don't think that's a big, high, hurdle for you to get over. It's a very simple, making the request, and then we approve it. So I'm agreeing with you in that I think, we can have a policy in place, and it doesn't have to be cumbersome.
It is important, I think, that we know the dates because the cemetery is used for other purposes. And so it would be good to have those dates in place for when we have a manager. All right, Candace, do you have anything? You do?
I agree.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I just want to make sure I understand, because I maybe have heard two different things.
So,
Will there be a policy that we can,
so
read
from the sounds of
somewhere and
it, we are
refer
going to develop a policy. In the meantime, while we develop a policy, you've notified us that you're gonna hold events and just send us something and we will contact you once we have the policy in place, so then you can address it
Okay.
specifically.
and it will be publicly posted
Yes.
on the town
Yes.
website, so we can
Yep.
refer to it, okay? So how much in advance would you like notice? We just want to be very careful not to, should we check with you?
I think right now is just, unless this committee says otherwise, you've told us you're gonna hold events. When you've
Yep.
scheduled them, just send
Yeah.
an email to us saying, hey, here's where it'll be. Once we develop a more formal policy, we'll let you know, here's now what the policy will be. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for now,
for now, you're good.
I'll let you and Karen know.
Yeah, and we can
And
let the
we're
other
good to
members know. Yeah.
Are there gonna be any sort of limits on participants, the number of participants that we can have?
Could be in the final policy, but for right now, no.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Okay, and are any areas of the cemetery going to be restricted?
We haven't in the past. When I led tours, I went all over. So I don't see. And the only problem would be if there was a funeral going on.
Of course.
And that would be a whole different, and you would
Yeah.
avoid that anyway.
Of
So
course, yeah.
And then we could be looking in the, not this summer, but the summer after of the restoration work starting.
yes.
Which
Right.
that could impact tours and the rest if actual work is being done
Right.
within the cemetery.
Yeah.
By the time we go to town meeting, we bid, it'll be the summer of 2023.
Okay.
That we would most likely, I would say the spring, summer, and fall of 23 is where the majority of the restoration work would
Right.
be happening. And just be aware that could be limit your
Okay.
access.
Okay.
And then creating a policy, we then avoid possible problematic situations where you've got somebody coming in and we do have whatever, there's restoration going on, there's various funerals going on. So I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that we can be reasonable about the whole thing.
Patrick, yeah.
I lived in Salem, Massachusetts for about a year and a half. Halloween was the rowdiest time of the year. The only red flag I hear in this whole thing is nighttime tours around Halloween. I personally see absolutely no reason to, as we develop this policy, to limit in any way what the library is doing with its tours. It's a tradition. You guys do a great job. Not about you. Halloween, that's another story.
Well, I personally.
And that's what raised the
prefer
red
not to-
flag this last
Yeah.
October, and me just took care of it.
Yeah.
Like, why do these groups saying they're gonna meet in our cemetery and hold these events? And I know Karen specifically, you reached out to one of the groups and was like, and they were like, oh, sorry. And
What bothered me most was the person I was reaching out to didn't even know the person who was leading the tour. She had just heard something about her. They set the whole thing up. They were advertising it on Facebook. And she didn't even know anything about the woman who was giving the tour. So this is not what we want for our cemetery. So,
Okay.
okay.
Okay, yes, thank you. I mean, I think we all have the same goals,
Yeah,
which
of
is
course.
preserving the history that's there and sharing
Yeah.
the wealth of history and knowledge that's there. So thank you very much. I think I've got it. We'll let you know. And when a policy is approved, you'll let us know.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. It's good to see you.
See you too.
Okay, so next, I was hoping Mike would report on how we're covering Chris's work until that position is filled. Or what's-
Yeah, so we have, I always mess up his name. Was it from
Oh, yeah, Richie Atwood.
Atwood? I was gonna say Atwell, I knew one. Rich Atwood is covering, all the burials, he's organizing them. He's coming in, he's filling out the forms and doing the turnovers to the treasurer.
Thank you.
So as far as burials are happening right as they should be.
And who does he report to?
He's reporting to me.
Okay, good.
Okay. And the other stuff is you're still dealing with trying to find a facilities person. Right?
Yeah, we're looking still at some options on that. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, he is very interested he does manage other cemeteries for other communities. So he knows where everything is. He knows how it's laid out. Him and Chris will go down and lay it out. So it's definitely one of those things that he is very, very familiar with it. And for the amount of burials we do, we just need somebody that can be that point person.
Yeah.
For it. And you do get burials that happen depending on religious and that where they have to happen within so many hours and stuff. So having him available is just, it's really, it's working. So and I think it's a possible long-term also.
And are we paying him per burial or on a retainer?
On a retainer.
Okay.
Same stipend that was being received.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to spend too long on this, but one of the things that I've been wondering about, and this will depend on who you hire, facilities manager, that in some respects, the work at the cemetery may be starting to bifurcate a little bit. There's the burial part, which has to be done in a timely manner and in good record keeping. And now we're doing more restoration, more long-term thinking about plantings and that sort of thing. So I'm almost wondering if we end up having two different, maybe Rich Atwood does the burials and the facilities manager does the other part. So I think that there may be a shift in what we need to cover this work. So I just wanted to put that into people's minds. All right. So then the next thing I wanted to bring up was the needed tree work for next year. Chris had identified before he left about $20,000 worth of tree work that needs to be done. And there is one tree that a huge limb came down and it was Mark was supposed to go in and take down the entire tree and it's still up. So
Yeah.
it's a little slow on that, but I wanted to talk about the funding for that.
So we have town meeting coming and I'm getting out to the committees. I've sent out to the departments, but now I'll get out to all the committees, what they're looking for funding. So funding, this will be a capital project because it's not something part of the routine of the cemetery. Because these are publicly owned trees, even though they've grown up in the cemetery, we have to have our tree hearings. We have to have our tree warden can remove any tree that's diseased, dead, or creates a public health or public safety issue. So obviously removing limbs, things like that are allowed to be done. Removing the entire tree is the requirement of a tree hearing, which we did do for the beach and we did do for the pump station down on Park Street. So we will have to hold a hearing where we have to mark all the trees in the cemetery that we are proposing to take down. And then we hold the hearing on them and then we remove them. Unless there could be issues with the trees themselves. So, yeah.
Do we have more than one tree that needs to come down?
I think Chris had identified several that's why it's $20,000 worth, I believe, is several along the, but hearing this makes me wonder, given the other project that we want to look at, is this something we wait on instead of, I didn't want to delay it necessarily, but we'll be going to the town for two different capital projects in essence.
Well, unless there's a public safety issue.
Yeah, that's a good trees.
Candace?
I just want to ask the same question. If it's a public safety issue, I think they should come down, but if it's not, I think we should wait. That was the only issue I had related to our survey report too, was a comment about the trees. So is it a safety issue of the $20,000 that's being proposed to be used? Is that because of a safety issue because of the trees?
My understanding is no.
Yeah, that's
they
what
were-
makes sense too.
They were not, the safety issue of the broken limb obviously was taken care of, but as far as above and beyond that, taking down trees just because, I'm not sure what the reason was that Chris had identified.
There was some diseased, there's some maples that we all wanted to keep, and there's some that need limbing back and have some diseases, and so it'd be nice to save them. Given some of the other demands, I don't know that this is a priority this year. But
If they are disease is one of the things you can do. And as far as even just some cutbacks to prune the trees and stuff, that is also something obviously we can do. It's just when we get to full removal of the trees, if they are healthy, that's where you have to have a public input on removal of.
Here's the case, I actually don't know all the details of this, unfortunately. This is
Right.
what Chris was so.
One question is, has the tree warden, does he have the list of these trees? Is he aware of these particular trees, and shouldn't we have him take a look at them? So we can at least anticipate, what they will require and whether they can be saved, et cetera,
I will
how bad
contact-
is their health, what.
I'll contact Mark and ask him if there were any trees that in his opinion met the 6 criteria for which he can remove a tree.
Okay, but has he seen this list?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, this was something I think Chris was working on toward the end. And
I could have sworn he said that he and Mark walked around together, but I may be misremembering that.
no, and that's what I was told. They walked around, but I never saw
Yeah.
here's this, there were no,
A
a
report.
lot of generalities, not any specifics.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, we have a budget.
Yeah, I see, given everything else that we were looking at, I perhaps think that
I
it's.
think our consultants might be the best to look at trees because they could also look at trees that are creating dangers to the cemetery itself. Their root system might be
Yeah.
that could be something that we could expand a little bit upon
Yeah.
consultants and say, okay, what do you recommend for tree plantings? Are there any trees that are going to cause damage, issues, or other things within our cemetery as they continue to grow?
Just 2 points. One, with dead trees, obviously, we can't rely on just because a branch or a limb looks safe, they weaken quickly. And with the storms that we've been having, with the wind events, we could see damage to the cemetery, to headstones and or to a person. So I think that we should prioritize if there are dead trees, I don't see any reason to wait on those. We're going to have to take care of it. We got money in the trust fund, or we can do a warrant item or whatever you guys want, but I don't see any reason to wait on that. The other question is if we're going to hire a consultant, there were some areas, for example, those hemlocks that have overgrown in that one section. I think that we should ask them about, sort of aesthetic issues, not just about safety issues.
Right.
I think
you
we
can take them down for aesthetic issues. You just gotta, that's where you have to hold the hearings.
Well, I think we were talking about cutting them
Right
back.
now, with his budget, and we can remove any trees that are a danger, disease where they're gonna affect other trees. He has 6 criteria as tree warden. He can take down a public tree without a hearing.
So I think we kind of have 2 different categories here. We have the identified trees, which I think the tree warden should probably just give us a report in terms, because we don't know necessarily that they're dead.
No,
So
I know, yeah.
just to have him, when he has a chance, to take a look and go through those trees and give us a report in terms of their condition and what can and cannot be done, should they be taken down, et cetera. And then I think this is a good point for the cemetery consultant to also then weigh in this other category, which might be potential damage to burial sites and headstones. So I think it's kind of like there's 2 things that could be going on in tandem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that let's ask the tree warden to do a review of the trees and give us a report. And then we'll hopefully be working with the consultants so we can talk with them about potential damage. I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's start with the tree warden.
Right, but there's also just pure aesthetic issues, not just damage issues. Like I know that in that one section there, the hemlocks, there was a feeling they were had overgrown to be twice as tall as maybe they should be. And there's some thought of trying to cut this back a little bit, just to make
Well,
it.
no, you
aesthetically
remember
better.
what Chris had come up with, and he gave us
Yeah,
the samples
that's
of
right.
limbing up. And
Right.
I very much like the way
Right.
that looks. I think it works very well for that. It's much better for overall maintenance, much easier for the maintenance crew. So I think we can tell Hugh to go ahead and continue that as his work allows him to, or unless it's a tree warden thing.
It could be either or.
Okay.
And as far as just cleaning up, like I said, if you need to limb a couple, that's not something that, if some limbs are overgrown and stuff that we just need to clean up. We clean up trees in front of here on Main Street and the rest as part of our yearly thing. I'm just talking about if we're making determinations of aesthetics to remove a tree.
Yes.
That's where you need to have a public hearing because you get the public to weigh in if they think aesthetically the tree should stay or shouldn't stay. So that's where the tree warden's authority becomes severely limited is if the tree, like I said, is otherwise healthy, then you really need to weigh the public good or the opinions of whether it should or shouldn't come down.
Yeah. Oh, Candace.
Just one comment. The cemetery consultant that we're talking about, is that the Preservation Inc. or is that somebody else?
I would say we're going to be in for a while with them. And I think all this is within their thing to discuss which trees may or may not be. And obviously we still have to have hearings on them, even if our consultants are identifying some they think should be removed.
So I just want to point out that their job is to protect the monuments. So the tree warden would be really important to get his or her opinion about the trees because you're not going to find agreement from me that we should be removing large trees because it's disturbing graves below it or because it's dropping some sap on a stone. I think it's far more important to have some beautiful stately trees in our cemetery to give it an ounce of liveliness. So just because the preservation folks want us to cut down a tree, I don't think we should just agree to that wholesale. And I'm saying this as somebody who worked in a botanic garden that was also a cemetery. So I know these two things can work together in a cemetery.
Yeah, and we've gotten no indication from Preservation Inc. about trees at all. And to be fair, I think what Chris was talking about was trying to help those maples become more healthy by trimming. So I think what the first thing we need to do is have the report from the tree warden. I think that would be very.
And the only thing, like I said, the tree warden will act on initially is whether or not we have a dangerous tree.
Right.
And those are the ones, like I said, he has the criteria for which he can remove them. And then the rest are a decision of this board if they even want to pursue taking down trees. And then, of course, a public hearing before you could take down the trees. So there's a whole process before any trees to make sure that they are protected in the cemetery. So.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I just want to point out on page 113 of the Preservation Inc. Report, number 8 says, large trees should not be allowed in the cemetery areas as tree roots disrupt graves and gravestones and falling limbs can damage gravestones. So I just want to point that out, that is a statement that I disagree with. And I can appreciate why they said it, however.
Right.
Yeah, but it's up to us, so we can definitely have the control over that.
It's one of those examples of where their mission is to look out for the monuments and the graves.
Right.
The tree warden is supposed to protect healthy trees.
Right.
And then.
Right.
Yeah.
And we find that perfect balance somehow. That's our job. All right, so great. So I think that the first thing to do then is not even talk about funding or any of this. We'll just get a report from the tree warden and we'll deal with that. All right, so the next thing is the review and discuss the draft assessment report and our next steps.
Do have copies of the summary?
Yeah, I brought my own, but I
don't have this. I didn't print out the whole.
I didn't print out anything either.
Print out everything is gigantic.
Yeah, it was horrible. I mean,
This is even longer than the bridge report.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it really? That's very funny. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. But I printed out the money. So actually, I think one of the first steps we need to do, it is a draft report. They are waiting to hear back from us on any changes we want. Has anyone identified any changes or issues or questions? It's a long report, I know. I haven't totally finished it myself, but.
Personally, I think that they should work with Candace to discuss and possibly amend the question of large trees in the cemetery. I don't want that to sound like it's town policy without this board explicitly endorsing it.
I don't think we are endorsing it. I mean, it's just a matter of, do we want them to change? I mean, we don't have to follow a lot. And this is their report. This is their assessment report. It is not policy that we're creating.
And I would say that almost any consultant is gonna say tree limbs, tree roots are a potential, so they're just identifying for us. So I think taking out something like that it should be part of the discussion.
Yeah, well, sure.
That's at least my feeling on that. It's something, once again, they're advocating from just the side of preserving the cemetery. And if you are, you don't want large limbs or other things
Right.
than that. So it's something we should.
Candace, yes.
Yeah, definitely, it's part of their conclusions and their recommendations. And I agree, I think they can leave it in the report and we just don't have to enact it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
can we just talk about that for a second? I think that when we spend $20,000 on a consultant, we should come up with a roadmap for action. And I think that if there's areas that we don't necessarily agree with, the roadmap should reflect the will of the body that manages this. That's just my personal opinion, is this isn't just, we've done a lot of reports over the last 20 years that collected dust. I don't want this one to collect dust. I want us to have a roadmap of action, and we're talking about $250,000. I think it's pretty important that it reflects accurately what our goals are. That's just my.
Well, there's no action item that I see on here
No.
in terms of trees.
Okay.
So what's in here does not actually even address trees.
This is not going to collect dust either.
I know. Oh, I know that.
So I think, as I said, the first question is, are there any additional questions that we want to ask them or changes? I would prefer not to put that change in. I think it's very minor, and I agree with Mike that
Okay.
any consultant would pretty much say that, and we don't have to follow it, so. But if there's anything that's been unanswered, I think they just let me know. Otherwise, I'd like to get back to them and say, yeah, as long as Mike and I can talk about this, but I think it's in good shape. I mean,
It's an incredibly comprehensive report.
yeah.
Right.
So there's talking here about a spreadsheet. Did you get the spreadsheet, or is that still to come, or where is that?
The spreadsheet does exist. I was also confused about it, and I just found it yesterday. It was part of a set of documents that he sent to both of us, but there was so many documents, I only downloaded the report. So I did look at the spreadsheet yesterday, and it'll be much easier to deal with, I think, to see it in person. It's quite, long, but there are photographs attached to each site, each stone. So I can send that to everyone, if that would be helpful.
I think that would be very
Sure,
helpful.
I'll send that to.
Can we, even if it's after the meeting, I think we should create, when we're talking about this sorts of numbers, it would be great if both this report and, any other documentation is posted to a packet for the meeting.
Sure. I'll work with Mike.
Although this is a draft, so once
Right.
we've accepted it, then it becomes a public document, it'll be
Okay.
posted.
So I'll send the draft to everyone so you can look at that. And then we won't go back and tell them that this is final until everyone's had a chance to look at the spreadsheet, see if there's any kind of questions or issues. That makes sense, everybody?
And I can act as a single point of contact so we don't violate the open meeting law. If you have any direct concerns about a specific item, send them to me.
Okay.
And what I can do is, if we have enough, we might want to meet on it again, which I can send to Karen, but if it's just, if there's really nothing substantial, then we can move forward, get this finalized and get it out there as what we're doing to restore the cemetery.
Okay, great. All right, so now let's talk about the money. Let's talk about what it will cost. I did some math to just give us a sense of what happens if we only do the emergency and the high. They've got emergency, high, medium, and low. If we just do the emergency and high, it'll range anywhere between 600,000 to 500,000. If we add in the medium, we try to do everything in one big gulp. This is including, by the way, the old section and the Curtisville section. It's easy to forget Curtisville, but it's in there. If we add medium to those figures, then we end up with a range of 214,000 to 265. Yeah, basically call it 266,000.
All right.
So, and what is in the long-term cemetery care fund is just over 400,000, 406,000. So the question is, I will go for whatever we're most likely to get. I would love to do any and all of it. So that's whatever this will.
What do you mean, what we're likely to get?
Yeah, well, whatever the town will approve. I mean, what do we think? I'd like to, what are the strongest odds of getting the funding? I'd love to go for, emergency high and medium, but if that doesn't make sense.
Why not low too? I mean, it's only $3,000, $4,000.
Which one?
The low is only another 4,000. I think we just take the report and implement it, in terms of the stone repairs.
It is to go for all of it.
Go for all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Roxanne, where are you on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, the low is such a small number.
Yeah.
Might as well take this whole thing and proceed with it. Obviously, though, it's going to be phased. I mean, it isn't all going to happen in 1 year.
Right.
So it's still going to be allocation of funds over, several years, so let's say 3 years.
Well, we could allocate the funds
Yeah.
this year, and then the funds would just be placed in a separate account and then drawn down over
Exactly.
10 years. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Terry, where are you on this?
I agree. I mean, I think we've been talking about this for years and years and years, and we haven't done anything,
Yeah, I remember being in a meeting years ago.
Years ago,
Yeah.
since when I first started, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of ideas, and so it might be time to.
Peter, I know you're not a voting member, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it as well.
Well, I think it'd be great to do everything. I do, one thing I just noticed that they mentioned is the possibility of getting some volunteers involved with some of the easy cleaning with some supervision. I mean, that would actually save some money. I don't know how the commission feels about that.
I'm personally very interested. I'd love to see what it's like to do it, and maybe we could come up with a small group of people.
Yeah, me too.
You'd be interested?
That and the other idea that she had about the older stones, if we can avoid the damage from the weed whacker, if we just simply clear out a space around it and then we plant like thyme.
Yes.
You plant something that is a ground cover that's low, that doesn't need to be weed whacked. That's another thing that I think you could probably get a lot of volunteers for that kind of thing.
Great idea.
Let's do that.
It was her idea, but I thought it was great. It was like, yeah, that's
Whoever.
And Candace, where are you on all this?
I agree with where the discussions are going, and I fully support planting of thyme around the base of the stones. We still have to make sure that the landscape maintenance folks understand that there's no weed whacking allowed in the old sections. And certainly starting it with the emergency and the high priority stuff makes sense. And so I don't know if that means, is that happening in the first year and then the second year becomes the medium priority items? Is that how this might work? And is there any need to say, okay, we're going to do a subset first. First, we're going to do this whole implementation of just the Curtis section to see how it looks, to see how it works. Is there a need to do that, or are we just going full steam ahead in the old section?
So I wasn't also sure if Peter had anything else to add.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
We can, I would say that the next one thing we need to is we would have our consultants come up with, similar to when you do a bridge project or a building project or anything, they would develop a spreadsheet that would show implementation, because there may be things that need to be done in a systematic way in order for it to be effective. So you may need to do X before Y, but Y might not be a high priority, but if you're gonna do it, one has to happen before the other. So typically in building projects, you get this timeline spreadsheet that says, it could be like with the bridge, it was demolition of the bridge, then installation of the footings, and there were timelines that broke down how to get from point A all the way to point Z. So we would expect that from our consultants. So, and my recommendation will also be with anything that we have, basically construction oversight, like a bridge, where we have the consultants overseeing this entire project. So what we need to also do, and I'm trying to remember if within there, that 266 was just the restoration work. So I'm trying to remember if it included their fee, if we use them for oversight.
Do they provide the restoration services?
What's that?
Do they actually provide the restoration services?
I had assumed so.
Yeah.
I had
Okay.
assumed so. I assume so, yeah.
The point I'm making is that similar to a bridge, I think that we need a periodic specialized clerk of the works kind of person.
That's what I'm-
Who's not tied to the restoration,
Right.
who's gonna has qualified to evaluate their work.
So I might have to contact them, right, because if they are going to bid as a consultant, as an actual, to do the actual restoration work, then whether or not, right, we want to have.
I think we should add another, probably, whatever that cost is.
Oversight, right.
Right.
I think that in the long run, you end up with a better product, better
Yeah, I agree.
everything. If-
I think that the one doing the evaluation of the work and the one doing the work
Right.
should be two different entities.
Absolutely, 100%
I
agree. That's what I meant by construction oversight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whether or not who they're gonna bring in or what, and that. So I can touch base with them. I'm
Okay.
also gonna recommend that with any project, you get into unknowns. So there should be a 10% contingency built on top of, the price. So once again, now we're talking about 283,000. Then if we're gonna have some construction oversight, that's gonna be another 10. So basically, you're looking at 300,000.
Okay.
And are we allowed, can we take it out of the cemetery trust fund? Is that what we're,
Vote-
so we're just
A
asking to
vote of
have it?
town meeting,
Yes, we're just asking to use that money, is
Yes.
that correct?
You're okay with it?
I would love to go full steam ahead. I'd love to just do this and, yeah, good. Is everyone, so do I need to make a motion? I guess I do. I move that we ask the town for 300,000 from the long-term care fund.
let's word it. I'm gonna make a recommendation for wording.
Okay,
That we appropriate the needed money at 266,000 as recommended in the report, a 10% contingency, and then the cost of construction oversight. And what I will do is between now and the next, I'll work with Karen and we'll get a price for the construction oversight.
okay.
I don't want to move on an assumption there. The contingency is 10%. That's what's always pretty much recommended. So we have two set prices right now and we have one variable. So I'd just like to,
Okay,
you know,
all right.
So just to be clear though, that this will, when we add those two numbers up, we're talking about depleting the,
3/4 of it.
at least 3/4 of it, 300,000, maybe a little more. And, I'm okay with that, but, it just,
No, I-
other projects then will have, and I think this also reinforces exactly why we must get it right.
Right. I mean, the other thing is that we do have some CPC funds.
We do.
Not a lot, that may be able to be allocated to this. Some previously,
Oh, that's great. That would be,
previous CPC funds
27,000.
that go back
You gotta
to
look at
2013,
particular-
14.
You mean it was already designated for this?
Yes,
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
that's fantastic.
Yes,
How much
that'll-
was it, do you think?
27,000, but it was around, we gotta pull the old warrant article and make sure that and the old CPC application that whether or not it'll fit. But I think it involved consultants and looking at.
And mapping.
And mapping
And mapping.
Oh.
and stuff, so that fits within this.
Okay, got it.
So we could potentially use that as an additional. So we'll pull it all together
That's great.
to get it done.
But yeah, it is giving that fund a big hit. On the other hand, that fund has not been used, I think I'm estimating for about 40 years.
Right.
Roughly, I mean, it just hasn't been used for anything,
Right.
so.
And we have to think about this. This is a restoration, so you can kind of compare that to us addressing the Civil War monument, addressing the chime tower. These are long-term. You're restoring something so that you're not going to have huge amounts of maintenance. You then want to make sure you're doing regular maintenance. But the reason this is a lot of money is, that ongoing maintenance hasn't necessarily been there for a very long time. So if we then institute, reasonable maintenance, keeping an eye on everything, it won't drop to this level.
Right, that's right. This is a years of postponement.
Right.
Yes, Peter.
So just to touch base again on that issue of possible community involvement with the cleaning. I just did, just looking at the math quickly on the heavy and light cleaning just in the old part. It's up to 120,000. So it's at least conceivable you could save some significant money if you got cleaning parties together. Now I actually, Preservation Inc. did my family's plot over in Richmond. And I worked with them and I did some of the cleaning. It's like really easy. The stuff you use, I think it's called D2, I think, is It's very safe, not toxic, and basically, it's easy to do. So, I don't know if we can put the people together, whatever. They talk about you definitely want to have a supervisor there while it's happening. You wouldn't turn people loose, but it's at least a conceivable way to save money, and I think, we don't have to decide that now, but it's something that could be thought about as we implement. It might be good for citizen involvement.
Yeah, I'm personally very interested in trying it.
So once we appropriate the funds and say in 3 years, we say 50, 60,000, at the end of that, we can have a town meeting vote to return the money to the trust fund and just simply return the money. But this way we go after enough to do everything. And then if needed, we restore that the other way.
Candace, is there anything else you wanted to?
I'm glad, was it Peter who brought up the volunteers? I think that makes sense to really try to enlist the help of volunteers, because 3/4 of the trust fund kind of makes me gulp hard.
Okay,
Good.
all right.
Well, look, we have almost, 650, 700,000 in CPC this year. We could ask them for 25 or 50,000 to augment our budget. We have that option. We could put this in the historic bucket for CPC. I don't see any reason not to spend the trust fund for this. We can always use CPC in the future for a different project, but if you're uncomfortable, that is an option we have.
I don't know what else is what other kinds of demands are going on, but I watched your Thursday morning meeting, and I can tell you have quite a few demands that are going to CPC. So what's the best strategy? Because you're right, I agree with you. There's things down the road that the CPC, maybe we could tap into that, but maybe this is not the year to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, future restorations, it could be using future restorations for go after CPC or free cash or whatever in the future. We'll still have over 100,000 remaining. As you pointed out, it hasn't been used, and say if this is our major restoration and the cemetery doesn't need to get touched in any major way for 50 more years, by 50 more years, there'll be another 400,000 because it's about 8,000. So hopefully we don't and it lasts longer, but the trust does build by about 8,000 a year. Some years it varies, but that seems to be the average over the last number of years, roughly. So the trust will begin building back up. And then, as was pointed out, if we use volunteers and others, there may be ways to not use all of it and then restore some of it back to the trust. So.
Okay. So I guess I feel like maybe we wait on CPC for other, the vault, the tool shed, that's down the road, and, maybe don't go to them now. Again, there's not much point in putting it in the bucket if it's going to be competing with so many other projects that it's not going to.
And the major purchase of the cemetery trust fund is exactly this.
Yeah, it's not used for yearly maintenance. That is not what it's for. It's for this kind of thing. So it seems to me appropriate that we save CPC for something like the vault down the road or the hearse house or whatever. So, all right. So
can I just add one more thing? Add two more questions, actually. The hedge all around the fencing, had we decided to do something about the hedging?
No, we decided not to decide right now.
Okay. Because that's potentially, if we decide in 2 years to do something, that would also probably come out of the trust fund, right? And
That doesn't have to.
No.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I know we're taking the stones that have been broken are going to and not be able to be reset and put back up. They're going into the vault, into the safekeeping. What is the plan for those? Is the plan to try to restore those and eventually get them back on the grounds, or are they there for viewing pleasure at some point? What is that purpose?
Based on what the consultants have said, I believe it's actually a combination of both of those things. I think some of the stones they might be able to repair, and I think they should be a relatively lower priority. That's an internal priority. And some of them I don't think are ever going to be able to get back into place. I think we just won't know. We don't have enough information. And my understanding is Massachusetts law requires that stones not ever be removed from a cemetery. So yes, they would have to stay there for a viewing pleasure.
But this budget does not include dealing with those stones?
I believe it did.
Oh, it does.
I think it includes moving the stuff to the vault, but I think there, as I recall, there's a point where it says you need to hire like a super duper expert to try to put a stone as
Yeah.
pieces
It's
together.
so shattered that.
Yeah. But certainly they need to be collected because they're in greater danger now on the ground. So Candace, I hope that answers it. It's really, I think it's going to end up being a combination of both.
But I think Candace's point is that that will require money and we may want to,
And that could be that's definitely a historic
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
the restoration of.
Yeah, down the
Right,
road.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think it'll be one of those things where we might want to look at this, whatever information we can get from those shadow stones and say, is this a historical important person or, related to the town, or is it just someone who lived in town and we kind of deal with that? And so I agree.
And it could come down to cost. You could be looking at individual stones that are tens of thousands of dollars because they're in such bad shape to be restored.
Right.
And you might say that just isn't feasible
Yeah.
or something. You don't know.
Right.
So,
Right. But, only speaking for myself, to the degree that we need future funding to do whatever we need to do to kind of bring this cemetery back to where it needs to be, I'm comfortable with, with looking at all of our options for funding to make sure this work happens,
Okay.
Just, it occurred to me, just one thing, another thing about in the future that I think is not covered by this, but could be important is like the sergeant stones, the ones that are now flat. I think they just say in here that needs to be studied and so I don't think that there's a recommendation on that. So I think it's not on that plan and yet that's something I think that's probably pretty important.
That's very important, I
What do you
think.
mean the sergeant stones that are now flat?
The sergeant, they were what are known as table monuments. They were on small legs, short legs before. And right now they're laying flat on the ground because those legs are either gone or they've sunk into the ground. So they're lying flat on the ground and it's not good for them to be. They were originally meant to be up.
But why aren't we fixing those as part of this process? I'm
Well,
curious.
as I understand it, and I'm not positive, they're saying that's a delicate subject that is not immediately answerable as to what the right thing to do is. It might involve some careful excavation underneath to, for example, see, did the post sink into the ground or not? And I think maybe even some experts might disagree about what the best way to proceed is. So I think they just sort of kept that out of this bid. We might want to talk a little bit more about that.
I think we should
Yeah, I do
at least
too.
find out what they're thinking.
I mean, I want them to keep deteriorating. I mean, obviously.
I agree. These are like the founders of.
Right.
Right.
Uh,
All right, so
Never dull.
I'll send them an email asking about what their thinking is about that. Just get a little more and try to get, if they're not included in this, then find out what they think it might be. So we'll find out. So the next step then is you're gonna contact them for something else, for the oversight.
To find out if they're going to be bidding on the project
Okay.
as the restorers, or would we be using them as oversight
Gotcha.
for the project?
Do we need to send out a bid when it comes time to do this?
We would, yes, this would be a bidded item
Bid, okay.
based on the price
All right.
that's there, based on qualifications. So you can do bids in two ways. One is lowest price, one is qualifications. We do a qualification-based one where they're submitting. And then, of course, the price needs to be within what we have appropriated for it. So, yeah.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, do we need to make a motion about the price?
Yeah, because in order to go out to bid and now you have to have funds available. So,
Right.
Yeah,
So,
this would set us up so that we would go out to bid after town meeting with the project and with an anticipation start in the spring of 2023.
You want to repeat did you make a record of the motion that you suggested?
So my recommendation of the motion is we appropriate the amount in the study, a 10% contingency, and then funds up. You might want to put a limit or something where up to a certain amount for oversight. And then we can adjust that number up or down depending on what we get for prices to do.
Why don't you say up to 10% for the oversight?
All right,
That's
so
it?
why don't we do 10
Is that what construction oversight typically is?
typically?
Okay.
Yeah.
okay, so, all right, so then what does that bring us up to? Is that,
20% of 266 is 52, so it's about 315.
okay.
Does the 266 include the low priority also?
Yes.
So it's the all encompassing.
No, it's another 4,000, so say 270.
Well, at the top it says it's 266 for everything. doesn't it?
I don't know, I was going by Karen's numbers.
Oh, 261, yeah.
261.
261.
Yeah, included
Oh,
all
okay.
items 1 through 12.
But don't forget, you got Curtisville section.
Right, right,
Right.
right. And that is, that's 994.
Okay.
So yeah, 70, you're right. We should, or 270 is.
Can I ask one other question? Do we own the Gideon Smith Cemetery over by the
Can we
bowl?
wait on that for a moment? Really, because it's, let's just wait on that, because I want to finish this part. I want to talk about Gideon Smith at some point, but let's finish this. All right. Because we haven't even worked out the numbers yet. You need to do 20% of 270.
Well, make a motion
70 is-
to appropriate 270,000 plus 10% for contingency, plus an additional 10% for construction.
Okay.
324.
And then I can get the exact number from those percentages.
All right, good. Well, I just want to know, do I need to make the motion now? We can vote on it. So, okay, so I move that we appropriate 270,000 plus 10% contingency, 10% oversight, total of 320, well,
Yeah,
whatever that total is. And that we go to the town and ask for that amount of money. So,
I'll second.
okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Now I will ask my question.
Now, yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, the stones at Gideon Smith are in terrible shape. Is that something we own? Or is that something that might be a CPC for if somebody else owns it? I mean, who owns that cemetery?
Well, Rick Wilcox seems to think, I think he thinks the town owns it, but he's also done some private work on it years ago, so.
I mean, those stones are range from the 1770s to about 1850. And they're all historic, every one of them. I don't know what happened to the Smith family, but they just sort of evaporated after 1850. There's no stones that are more modern than that. And I don't know why, if we're doing this, a plan that, I think that maybe it's just a whole separate proposal, but,
I was gonna say this is just something you just brought up now, so it wasn't part of our original
Yeah.
Right.
conversations.
Right. And I think I
The first
researched,
question is, we can't spend a dime on it unless it's owned by the town.
We need to.
can we just like do the research on this one and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did some research a while ago on this, and it seems to me that I saw somewhere in Mass General Law that after so many years, that it does revert to the town, but we'll have to check. I would check with
The
town
town
council.
can take over a cemetery, but
Okay.
it doesn't mean we have.
Okay,
So.
So there's a
'cause
process
It doesn't,
involved.
cemeteries, I don't believe, just revert to the community.
there are dozens of headstones there. Many of them are, I mean, Candace,
There could be private cemeteries on private land and everything there.
I don't even know about the
It could be
land.
a private.
it was originally, what is now all of Northeast Stockbridge was the Gideon Smith farm from he got a grant from the king. Then, and then they ran that whole area as a farm, and then the Wheatley folks, the count, whatever his name was, De Heredia bought it from the Smith family in the 1870s or something, 80s, the historians would know better than me, but I mean, there's there's markers in the ground that go back to the 18th century in that part of town.
What's
Yeah.
the street it's on?
It's on Mackinac Road, or maybe Hawthorne Road. Actually, it's probably called Hawthorne Road at that section. It's just north of the causeway. There's a little hill right across from the White Pines entrance.
Trying to go on our.
Yeah.
but I mean, that should be our next step, is let's determine what the status of that is and what kind of procedures we would have to do.
Yeah, it's kind of just south of the White Pines entrance,
Yeah.
on the other side of the road. It abuts
On the
Camp
lakeside.
Mackinac.
On the lake side of the road.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can talk about it offline. We don't have to figure it out now, but,
No, it's a good
No.
question. I just wanted to.
it's all good.
Building out of the way.
I've wondered myself. I have no idea. And no one seems to know. The town doesn't know who owns it or anything about
We
it.
should go see Michael Blay after the meeting.
I'm on the assessors. That's what I was on. We just gotta figure out exactly where it is and then
Well, it's
Maybe
just,
it's on the bend.
just past,
That says town of.
go over the causeway and it's on the left-hand side as you're going, yeah.
It's just north of Oak
It's
Street,
about Oak Street, right?
just north of Oak Street.
Yeah.
It looks like it says the town,
Yeah.
trying to see if there's any documents, there isn't. Town, yeah, Gideon Smith Cemetery, yep, it says town of, Stockbridge, town of, so it's
Yeah, there you
been
go. All right.
identified in 19, yeah, it's well.
Is there any money left in the consultant fund that we already funded? Did
No,
we spend the entire 20 grand that we funded for the
Yes.
consultants?
yes,
Yes.
yep.
Is there anywhere where we could find a couple thousand for them to just go look at it? Or is that a whole new appropriation?
That's the whole.
It's a whole new appropriation.
And you can't use trust fund, cemetery trust funds on that. So, because we haven't collected any money.
Let's get
not a
can we-
Trust fund money, that would have to come from like CPC or something else.
So maybe we just restart the process like we did for the main cemetery, figuring out what the consultants would charge to do an evaluation there and putting that on the warrant too.
Yeah, but where you're gonna, yeah, well, you could take it from free cash or something else. We just can't take it from the cemetery trust fund.
Oh, I don't, funding is separate, but I just think as a process, it's another really historic part of,
I
You know.
I know. I
I
think,
totally agree. It's historical commission there, yes.
yeah. I mean, it's like, look at, not to complain, but we, as a town, we've tended to ignore some of the outlying areas, including North Stockbridge, and I think that's something we should rectify. It is a really important piece of the town's history. It goes all the way back to the King of England.
I can ask our current consultants to go over and just take a look at it and give us an estimate,
Yeah.
doing an evaluation of it, and then get that back, and then we can look at possible other funding sources. We won't have probably enough time for CPC or, and can't use the trust fund, because the trust fund's only for that cemetery, so it'd have to go town meeting, maybe free cash or something else if we were to get a price.
Right.
And depending on when they can get in there, right now, it might be buried, and by this weekend, might be buried in snow. So
yeah.
Yeah.
we might not be able to pull off an evaluation until much later.
Right now for this.
Or we could ask
CPC
them
round.
for 10 grand out of CPC as a down payment on it. I'm just throwing it out. I'm not saying we should.
I
Like
just
to have
always
time
get nervous about
this
throwing
round.
out stuff just for the sake of
This
throwing
is-
out.
Okay.
oh my-
All right, you got it.
As long as it's on the agenda and it's moving forward.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what worries me. We're going for a big ask here, and I don't want to go for an additional kind of smaller ask that throws people off and says, well, why are we doing this anyway? I don't know. So-
I don't think anybody is going to vote against this, Karen, but
Actually, in the last town meeting, 8 people voted against the cemetery consultant plan.
all right.
Those
Those 8 people.
little
then.
digital voters, so I could tell who.
And what, we have 200 people
I don't
there?
know who it was, but,
We have 200 people there, so, I think we're doing pretty good at it.
so some people will vote against the cemetery. All right, so we're good, and we're done. We're going to
You're the
postpone
best.
the other thing. I said, if there's time, we'll talk about raising our cemetery fees at some point, but good work, everybody. This was fantastic. I'm delighted.
Thank
that
you,
we're-
Karen. You're doing such a great job at
Thank you,
managing this
thank
whole.
you, thank you.
We're,
Agreed.
I'm only as good as the people I'm working with.
somebody
so.
said we're getting things done, and I think that's consistent.
Yep,
Yes, it is, thank you.
moving forward.
Good to see you, even through the screen there. So, all right, good. All right, so
Adios.
our next
Talk to
meeting
you
will
soon.
be February 20-something.
Wow. I get to an hour. This is really
Well,
good.
I'm trying to, that's what I'm working to do is, so we,
Motion to adjourn.
a motion to adjourn,
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're good.